Welcome to the Cowboy Office Show, where you'll experience expert analysis and epic discussion on key pillars of the equine industry, including sports, business, hobby, and the horse lifestyle. Your co-hosts are Jody Brainerd and Brian Dykert, industry veterans with over 120 years combined living the cowboy lifestyle. The Cowboy Office Show will help you get involved, ask more questions, and create change. We'll keep riding for you as together we learn from the ride already ridden, learn to listen better to our horse, and make our industry better for all. Each episode will take a ride around the industry in less time than you can load the truck and trailer. Drop your email at cowboyoffice.com to receive updates and never miss an episode. Saddle up as we ride into today's show.
Hello, Horse World. They say the older we get, the faster time flies. Here it is, 2025, 25% of the way into the 21st century. The industry is changing. And as one of our past presidents said in 1910, in one of his famous speeches in France, Teddy Roosevelt, the credit goes to the man in the arena. Ride with us by going to cowboyoffice.com, put your email in. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button on the platform of your choice. Welcome to the Cowboy Office. I'm Brian.
And I'm Jody. Today, we have the man in the arena. I've known this guy for so long, I hate to compare him to Teddy Roosevelt. He's one of the best, if not the best, when it comes to ground.
You introduced me to him.
Right, exactly. And I think that ground thing, I might have to call him the second best guy on ground, because I think his father, Bob, who was turning ground when Jimmy was riding a stick horse, is probably the best.
But I'll give you that one.
Right, okay. Well, anyway, it's all about good ground, good judges, and good purses. And we want to welcome Jim Kiser from Kiser Arenas as the family innovators and educators for all things that do with horse ground. Welcome, Jimmy.
Thanks, Jody.
Well, how's it going, Jim?
It's all good. It's all good. Looking forward to what 25 brings. Got some exciting stuff coming up. The industry still looks really strong. Just keep wondering where the limit is.
Well,
for events and purses and better horses, better training, which should be followed by better ground.
without a doubt, but you've got a very interesting career because you came up the ranks as a pro, you were a judge, you were a professional trainer, you had a lot of success as a rider and trainer. Then this second half of your career, you shifted in the ground expertise, which was taking on what your dad started, which I think is all phenomenal. But just talk about in your involvement. We're going to get into it because you've been managing the ground at all the major events, the American Performance Horsemen that brought the American Rodeo and cutting and reining and cow horses together. And now they're going to do them in two separate venues this year, 2025, again, a new change. But talk about for a minute the change in the industry across your career, where we've kind of come from, really where we're headed. Where do you see that?
So we've been involved in the footing aspect of this for 37, 38 years now, probably since about 1988. I'm surprised sometimes at how far that we've even evolved with it. And Dad will admit this. We came in and tried to make it better, but there's been a tremendous learning curve for us, just like there is training, different aspects like that. He'll admit that some of his earlier attempts at improving the ground, they weren't nearly as good as what we've got now. It's been a learning experience for all of us across the board, from not just the reining, but the cow horse, the cutting, the AQHA World Shows. Both of you guys remember that the World Show is a great example of the involvement that we've seen. And he was a great guy, but I think we laugh about this a lot. Huddy Hudspeth, taking care of the ground at the World Show. It was a great story. The arena got drugged, but it got drugged the same for every event. The barrels, reining, cow horse, all of it. One of the things that happened when they brought us in was we picked out a different footing that we could manipulate for, all of the different disciplines at the World Show and everything, and it was a major improvement. Cutting was the same way. The cow horse was the same way. I can remember when we first started doing the ground at the cow horse, I spent a lot of time with Bill Inc. because Bill watches every run. I'd been involved forever with it. I was sitting with him one day and I asked him, I said, what do you think? And Bill being Bill, you just have to know Bill is a great guy, larger than life character. He just kind of glanced over at me and he says, quit worrying about it. He says, this is so much better. He says, this used to be a contest about who didn't fall down. And now we've got such a better surface for those horses to perform on. It's been a lot of fun watching this and being involved in it.
Well, talk about for a minute. I want to take us one more step because these are your stats. And Kiser Arena is moving forward as well as the industry. True, right?
Yeah, we hit a point here as far as stats go, and I'm not the statistician that you are, but there's some things that I do try and keep track of. And at one point in time last year, I sat down and the best that I could, and I actually enlisted the help of the associations and everything. I figured that we have approximately been about $350 million in prize money awarded on ground that we personally selected, installed, and maintained at these events. So you start going through some numbers like that, and it really becomes mind-boggling where this industry started, where it was, and where it's going. As we keep trying to improve this, one of the things that we're doing is we're starting to see actually some people that are starting to incorporate AI into testing ground soundness of horses and things like that. That stuff really excites me, and I'm pretty fortunate in the sense that I'm going to start to be involved in some of those programs on testing the footing in relationship to what the footing is and the soundness of the horses.
Well, I think that that's pretty fascinating. I'm going to add a couple more because the $350 million is a big one, and I just pulled some numbers just on the reining industry and lifetime earnings, but we're right over 100 million in lifetime earnings, and that's only the top 50. So that's not cumulative across,
Right.
1,200 people or whatever that is. So simply times three disciplines. Yeah, I don't doubt that at all, and it's probably very conservative. But you've also got your dad, your company, you guys have got arenas and ground in 45 states and 11 different countries across your career, and now the second generation. So I think that's very interesting as well. And a big piece is the knowledge that comes out of that, because you got material of ground to work with, as well as the discipline demand, and then the staff by which staff, equipment, etc. Is equipment in Europe the same as North America, or equipment in Brazil the same as, I don't know.
As far as the equipment goes, obviously been a tremendous evolution in that too. I mean, we've got the first drag that we built sitting out in front of the shop, and it in no way, shape, or form resembles the equipment that's being built now. And there's some other companies out there that are starting to and have been building equipment for a while and trying to improve how we manage the footing at events and at training facilities and all of those things. I think the next step of the evolution, though, is to try and provide better footing. And as far as the 45 states and 11 countries, the consultation work that I've been doing, there's an element of that. It's a little frustrating sometimes, but it also tells you how much room for improvement that there is. You get in certain parts of the country and in different places in the world, good arena footing is almost non-existent. And so I've told this story before. I'll go into a quarry or a dirt pit, something like that, and say, okay, I'm looking for this. What do you have that's similar to this, whatever it is? And inevitably, and I mean like 90 times out of 100, they'll look at me and they'll go, well, what are you going to use it for? Okay, well, I've got an arena to build. Oh, well, here's what we use around here, and everybody loves it. And I look at it and go, okay, this is junk. This is absolute junk. And it doesn't make them bad people. They lack education and a little bit of ability to think outside of the box. So I'm like, okay, that's not what I'm looking for. I need to find this, because what you're using maybe might have satisfied us 30 years ago, but it's not good footing now. Well, like I said, there's places that stuff is really, really hard to find. You might have to make up different blends of it. Their common answer is, well, this is what everybody uses around here and they love it. Even if they love it, that doesn't necessarily make it good footing.
But isn't that a testament to the movement of the industry? Because where I'm going is, the common reflex of what we do with horses. Oh, you're riding horses. Okay. It's kind of it's kind of a layman's, not a big deal. And now as the industry, both English and Western, is getting more advanced exposure and they're seeing that it is a big deal, right? That's really where it is, which is the demand of the athletic competition, which means that common people don't understand. The average person out there in the public does not understand what we're doing at advanced levels in the horse world. Fair statement?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of the things that has spurred the growth of our consultation business, is that your, what we'll call your consumer or your horse enthusiast, is starting to recognize that as they go to events and see better footing, the horse is performing better, staying sounder, and all of these things. They're starting to recognize that.
I think that's just awesome conversation. And a couple questions pop up right now. It's like the horse business, sooner or later, it's always about money everywhere. There's one question: does the industry have enough trained and qualified resources, as in people and equipment, to prepare and manage ground for the continued demand of the high performance in the cowboy world? That would be question number one. Number two, Jim, do you find yourself, when you go into a spot, and like I said, Brian and I have had this conversation many times about how amazed we are about the amount of disposable income that there is available now, that when we were trying to train horses, it wasn't there, right? I mean, now it's amazing. We were constantly trying to save money all the time. We go to a horse show and maybe we had 2 tack stalls and then we had them jammed full. And now somebody will come in and they'll have 6 extra stalls that'll have 2 tack. One's got a couch and a kitchen in it. And they just, like, there is no limit to what people will do. Do you ever find when somebody calls you in that you have a limit of amount of money that you need to work with and you have to find compromises? Or do you go into a facility and say, look, this is going to cost $100,000 to put this ground in, and there's just no other way? And if that's the case, then is there lifespan on that footing? How long does it last? Just throwing that out there.
You got 3 big questions.
Yeah, let's go back and hit me with, because I want to address these individually. Ask me number 1 again.
Okay, do we have enough trained and qualified personnel to manage all of the footing at all of these shows?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's another thing, that's something that we're trying to get into, is a lot more training of people in that aspect as far as facilities go and everything. Because, you know, a great example of that is the reining fraternity, for example. That takes 10 people to manage that ground at the reining fraternity, 5 in the daytime and 5 at night. And that was always a constant struggle to come up with 10 people, and seeing a need for that. That's one of the directions that we're trying to go now, is opening up more training so that we can provide more qualified people, because the volume of events just keeps increasing. We're not going to be able to keep up with the demand for qualified personnel to manage that ground. You look up at, especially, you know, once we start getting into fraternity season and everything, the events and disciplines that we're involved with, there's a shortage in the fall. Otherwise, you're looking at trying to use the same people and keep them on the road for 90 days at a time without going home. You'll burn them out, and they just can't perform the way that they need to. So, like I said, that's one place that we're trying to go, is to try and figure out how to train more people to do this. I mean, it's kind of like the little bit the same as the horse training thing. You spend a career doing that, and then you look up and think, okay, I've got an opportunity here, got a lifetime of knowledge that I can spread to other people by doing clinics. And that's basically one of the things that I'm starting to try and do, is more footing clinics to train people on the aspects of better footing and better footing management.
Which is really about where you flipped it over, is your ability to go to them and train staff already in place for more knowledge, more experience, and advancement, right?
Well, and we're, you know, as I do that all of the time, all of those facilities that I go to, it's kind of a twofold thing. We're going to try and improve the material that they've got and their knowledge of how to take care of it.
Right. And there is a life cycle in ground, whether people know that or not. I've experienced it. I know that, but most people don't. Correct?
Yeah, but that's part of training these people on what that material consists of and how to manage it better. Because yeah, eventually ground does become wore out. It does have a lifespan. You have a period of time there where that footing can be really good, and then as it starts to deteriorate, there's some band-aids that you can put on it to extend the lifespan of it, but eventually you run out of band-aids and you have to start over. But it's just like everything else. We have to start, and it starts with education of these facilities and everything, to realize that that footing can become worn out and that they need to start budgeting for improved footing.
Interesting. And the lifespan of that footing is great. And like I said, we're talking about the money thing. Do you ever see this evolving into a number of independent contractors, like somebody that has this as a small trucking business? I have, 5 semi trucks. I'm not, 1,000 truck unit. Somebody that says, you know what, an independent of a facility or a fairground, say, you know what, I've got 5 tractors and 5 drags, and we're going to put a bid in for Oklahoma City and or Tulsa and or. Do you ever see that happening, or do you feel like it's just going to be a company like Kiser that is going to take care of multiple arenas, like you guys have done forever? And you just said, you can't keep your people on on that same footing for months and months, because it's like, I don't want to do this anymore. So is that something that could happen?
Jody, I think that there's a strong possibility that could happen. I think that that's a ways off in the future, though, because we'll go back to these associations and facilities having to budget for that. Right now, there's a lot of places and events that are just willing to be satisfied with what's in there, and it is what it is. We've got dirt in there, so there's no problem, right? But I think one of the things that you'll see happen is we start trying to educate these facilities, their employees, and the public in general on this, and we're able to start having instrumentation to test this footing. I think that's going to be one of the turning points in this, as to where when we can come in and say, all right, we've created, for example, footing at the reining futurity, and we have these testing parameters, and here is what we start to understand as the best possible footing. Instead of it just being an opinion, we've got the instrumentation to test it. The trickle-down effect to your smaller facilities, when they start asking for that testing and realize how far away that they are from having qualified footing, safe footing that keeps the horses sounder and all of those things, I think that's maybe when we'll start to see a little bit more of what you ask, as far as companies developing that and operating in those parameters.
Okay. Interesting. That's really good. When we're talking about this, like say the reining futurity and the cutting futurity, and most all the reining horse trainers, they want the same ground that they're riding on at home. And it varies, right? But they're, sure, it's self-serving. I want dirt that like this is what I train on all year, so I want that. And sure, you're not going to be able to satisfy every single person, because, like I said, a horse trainer will bitch if he sets on a gold nugget about his butt being sore, instead of realizing what the gold nugget is worth, right? So when you have these, what we have now, crossover events that you are managing, or you have managed to run for $1 million, and the World Show, we just had a little discussion about that. What are you doing to try to satisfy each and every person in there? Because, your footing cutters are different than the reiners, and you're getting a whole bunch of these things thrown together for a hell of a lot of money. And are you having to deal with unsatisfied customers? Have you got your trainers coming up and say, I can't show them this, or whatever, and some guys saying, yeah, it's fine, and some guys just like, how are you managing multiple events at the same time? That would be my question.
Well, let's start with an event like the World Show, where you have that many different disciplines. One of the key factors in allowing us to manage that footing to the best of our ability is the involvement and knowledge of the show management themselves on the schedule. It's not possible to have the finals of the junior reining after the finals of the senior barrels without taking several hours or several days, depending upon the moisture content, to be able to manipulate that back into good reining ground after you've just had the finals of the of the barrels. Production on some of these other events, such as the American Performance Horseman, one thing that's difficult on those things is that those things become such a production. They start wanting to cut your time frame down on being able to manipulate that ground between the disciplines. You start with the cutting, then you go to the reining, then you go to the cow horse. And they're great organizations, but when the production side becomes that big, it becomes pretty hard to manage sometimes. I've said this before, and we managed to pull it off, which took, a tremendous amount of experience to figure out how to do this. But for example, the American Performance Horseman, we had 30 minutes between the cutting and the reining to manipulate that back into reining ground. And then we had 10 minutes between the reining and the cow horse. And I told him, I said, I need more time. You have to understand. I understand your production aspect of it, keeping the people involved, keeping them in their seats, all of these different kinds of things. But bottom line is, for the betterment of the event, we really need to have more time. If you need to have another concert between the reining and the cow horse, that would greatly benefit the event just by giving us more time to prepare the ground. So there's two things there at the World Show: the schedule, which is a really, really difficult thing to manage. But I think as we start trying to use the instrumentation to test this and say, okay, if you're going to have the finals of the reining after the finals of the barrels on a scale of 1 to 10, somebody's going to take a hit here. Either it's not going to be as good a barrel ground, or it's not going to be as good a reining ground. Are you satisfied with having a 3 out of 10 for your reining ground at your AQHA World Championship? Once you start being able to give them the testing and the statistics and the reality of what that is, they'll be more inclined to listen and start to try and help manipulate that schedule.
Interesting. And Brian, I want your input on this one, just because I'm just throwing this stuff out here, just because I'm thinking about this as I'm listening to you. We know that people are crazy, right? I mean, as a general rule, we can be.
Yes, we are.
Just some of us.
Yes, just some of us. But what I'm saying is, not trying to go down a rabbit hole here, but I mean, you turn on Facebook or social media, and I see picture after picture of abused or starving dogs, and I never see a picture of an abused or starving child, right? I mean, we have to save this dog. Nobody cares about the kid, right? And I'm going the direction of Churchill Downs and a horse that runs and breaks its leg. And I worked on the racetrack, and in the 70s, it happens, right? I mean, they're athletes, and it happens. If a human breaks his leg in a football game, they don't show it, right? They don't go back and show that clip again. And when this horse runs down the track and breaks its leg, sometimes it happens. Well, now all of a sudden we look at footing. So Churchill Downs changes the footing, and they close the track until they can get the footing changed. And they're kind of like you're talking about the hunter jumpers and ground manipulation. And I'm just saying, sometimes accidents happen. It's like Bill Link, just like you talked about it. This used to be about horses not falling down. And when you're talking about the performance horseman, and our production is going to take place here. Who's responsible if one of these things falls down and breaks a leg in the pen because the footing is bad or poor and you didn't have time to manipulate it? I mean, attorneys can sue anybody for anything, anytime. Is somebody going to say, Jim, this is your responsibility? Or are they going to, because you're going to, hell, I didn't have time to manipulate the ground like it should be. I mean, do you see that as a potential problem, a liability for poor footing somewhere? Brian, you ran footing forever. Is that a possibility? I'm just throwing it out there because I want your opinion.
I'll jump on it first. He can go into the details. The liability in event production is real. Yes. Yes, it's even more so because our world has got an animal, and that animal is unpredictable, and it's a 800 to 1,200 pound animal. I mean, so yes, all of those things are real, no doubt. And running a venue that has to be able to produce multiple different events, it's no different than a horse show having different disciplines in a day. A venue's got to have, the biggest question I used to get was, how could you have so many horse shows? Well, the answer is they're not the same horse show. A quarter horse show, an Arabian show, Morgan show, a hunter jumper show, a reining, a cutting, a cow horse, a roping. You can keep on going down the list, but you could have 50 different horse shows, which would be a horse show a weekend, but they're not all the same. That's a plus when you talk about, it's a downside when you talk about the demand, because the venue is pressured to have quality infrastructure, stalls, arenas, coliseums, climate control, air quality, parking, security, disinfectant, all of those things. But then you get talking about what we all perform on, which is ground, and a big change and a movement in the industry, which would lead me back to Jim can get into the details of the ground. And I saw this and I lived through it. The ability to take ground in and out was always cost prohibitive. That is coming down. We are seeing venues and events that it is not cost prohibitive to own your ground, put it in for a major event, take it out, store it, do what you want to do, which is where the reining came. Reiners, cutters have done that for 30 years. That movement in the industry we're seeing, does it carry other liabilities that go with it? And the answer is yes, of course. You remember in our day, we used to warm up with the tractor and the drag sitting in the corner. I mean, we did.
Yeah.
And why we didn't have more wrecks and more problems than we did, and we didn't. So yes, in today's time, those things are real. Do you have to take forward steps to minimize those? Yes. Insurance premiums are doing nothing but going up. Yes, everybody's looking to blame somebody. And when they have an accident, do they want it to be somebody else's fault and therefore compensate them in some form? Yes, and that's just the new modern society. There are ways you can minimize that. It's just real. And insurance is a big one in the event world. But the horses, and I don't have this answer, the fact that we can insure our horses at an advanced level as well, because you can get insurance on horses for loss of use. So if they're not able to perform athletically, and you got a lot of, the average yearling is now 35 to 45,000. Whoa, you know, that's pretty pricey. So it's real. On the detail of the ground, I'll let Jim talk about it, because that's an interesting piece and where I see the industry moving. I think a big one, Jim, is the industry's trying to come back together and showcase some of the best parts of our sport. Cow horse cutting, reining. My question would be, is that going to be sustainable at the height that the demand is because of this? Because you've got different ground requirements that are not the same for the disciplines. And can they do what we're trying to do right now, as opposed to, would it be better off to have a high performance cow horse on Friday, high performance reining on Saturday, high performance cutting on Sunday, something? There's different formulas you can play with there. So talk on that one.
Oh, there's about 4 different things there that I need to run a thread through to tie all together, but I'm going to start with inherent risk, which is a really difficult one. As anybody that has ever owned one knows, that owning one starts with realizing that there is inherent risk involved here. They're not really that good at pets. Like I said, several different aspects of this. You were starting to talk about moving the ground in. It used to be cost prohibitive and everything. I think as how much education is going to be involved here is really, really important, because as our purse levels increase and we need to keep these athletes sounder and everything, I think that hopefully if we can educate these people on what the parameters are, that instead of every 3 years adding $100,000 to the winner of cutting fraternity, reining fraternity, cow horse fraternity, whatever it is, that some of that budget is dedicated to the footing. That's going to be a hard push, because everybody is all about that purse money, that purse money, that purse money, to try and keep these horses sound and their athletes. And we'll go back to that inherent risk. I can remember a conversation that I had with a track manager at a major racetrack, And we were discussing injuries one day, and he says, hey, man, he says, I have seen some nasty things happen. He says, you know, you think you've created this masterpiece surface and something can still go wrong. The inherent risk that becomes involved here. But professional athletes, football, baseball, basketball, they are all about trying to keep these guys healthy and the research that it's involved with it and try and come up with the best surfaces that they can. But there's still going to be injury involved here. They do everything that they can on a football field to make that work. And these guys are still going to get hurt. But I think so much of it just goes back to the education and realizing that if we want to improve the situation, there has to be a budget for it. And as far as these major events where they're trying to showcase 3 different disciplines, yeah, obviously it would be really beneficial if you had plenty of time, whether it's a day in between them, whatever it is, but you're going back to the budget of the event, renting a facility for 1 day instead of 3, all of these things. How do all of those things meld together?
Yeah.
I think it's just, again, it goes back to testing this stuff and realizing, all right, here's the happy medium. Here's what we can do in this time frame and for this cost. It goes back to one of those things that one of my best friends is, you know, one of the best guys on the equine lameness in the world. It was kind of a joke between us, maybe not a very funny one, but the arena builder or the manager of the footing and event being myself, him being a vet, I said, one of us is going to get their money.
Right.
And unfortunately, it was him most of the time.
Right. Right.
And you know, he readily admitted over and over again, if they would just take the time and let us do what we needed to do and spend the money to do what we needed to do, his income would have decreased substantially.
But I would I see this in the industry as a whole, because in our time, all of us collectively, the industry was all one mixing pot. It's actually trying to evolve up and out, because what you're talking about is a difference between business and those, and it all comes back to what Jody says, because it's all about the money. So in today's time, everything has cost and reward, and I see the industry trying to take the big step that we all used to talk about, dream about as young pros, making a career, having the money return as a sport, using our great horses versus just the activity of it, which I'm going to put in the category. So I break it out in 2 categories. One, hobby, just the weekend. I'm a hobby golfer. I'm not a pro golfer, never would be. I can dream about it, but I'm not. I can enjoy the sport, blah, blah, blah. I can stay within my means. Completely different scope and everything than a professional golfer trying to earn a living on tour. I would tell us as an industry, we're starting to see the beginning of that separation, because that's exactly what you're talking about. And as a group of business people, professional people, I'm talking about the athletes, etc., as well as the event production. Because when you talk about the horse shows or the horse events or the horse competitions, it's still made up of all of that melting pot, and you get too many diverse demands in there as opposed to getting focused. Am I somewhere on target? Do you see some of that, Jim?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about that. You know, it kind of goes back to, you just are hopeful that all of this keeps time with the evolution of everything that we're seeing, because there's so many different aspects that will need to keep time. The training techniques, the saddle, your farriers. You know,
Farriers and vets.
Farriers, your vets, things like that are obviously a major, major aspect of this. All of this has to evolve. Can't just have 50% of it evolve and leave the rest of it. We won't get there.
Right. I would bring that into the event production side, because this is where I see a big weakness in today's industry. And I put the responsibility on the jurisdiction of organizations. Quit having horse shows that try to serve them all. It's time to start having horse shows, organized horse activities that start to get focused on the consumer that they should be designed to serve. And I break it into 3 categories. beginner, intro. I'll use golf as the thing. I got 4 different tees that I can choose to play from, which is about depth of competition and how well that is. But the beginner, the people that want to just have a good time and begin to develop skills and answer their own questions, there's a medium group that needs to practice and advance, and then there's an advanced group. I see event production, and it goes directly to ground, quality of ground, flexibility of ground, which is just like flexibility of venues that are succeeding, and we're seeing it in the industry. Venues are expanding. Look at what Oklahoma City and Fort Worth have done in our lifetime. Oklahoma City has been rebuilt, now going on the 3rd time. So in 35 or 40 years, Fort Worth is going through that as well. Lazy E is expanding, major competition, but we see more venues coming online all the time. And one of the keys to those venues is flexibility. That same thing's going to be in demand of ground. And you see the English and the Western world go down 2 separate paths, because synthetic ground will not work for the cowboy side of the world. True?
To some degree. I think one of the things that, as I'm listening to you, one of the things that I would be hopeful of is what you're talking about, but in the aspect of your major events, focusing more on the footing. And this is going to be kind of reverse of how a lot of things are done. I don't think we're going to start this progress on the lower end. I think we're going to have to start this footing progress on the higher end and let it trickle down to the lower end. I think that'll happen by default to some degree. I think it's just hopefully where that goes.
So, and I think this is great conversation of what we see right now, the way that our business is structured, and Brian's heard it till he's sick of it, no doubt, but I say the answer is always in the middle. And when you say this footing right now is the best for all of us right now, so you have to create a footing at the World Show that is the best for everybody that's in there. So I think right now, and it's changing rapidly. And like I said, if you'd have told me, Brian, in our lifetimes, we would have seen what it has become. If you'd have told me that even 30 or 35 years ago, I say, you're crazy. It'll never happen. And wow, it's beyond what we possibly thought would be the best. So right now, all the new venues, the E's, the expansions in Fort Worth, Oklahoma City, did anybody with the new building, the new arena in Oklahoma City, did anybody come to you and say, Jimmy, what should we put in here? Or are they just going to go, what's going to happen?
The result of that was they actually did realize, with that arena floor being bigger, it was going to require a higher volume of material. So they did request, and we did buy some more material to try and match what we already had, freshen it up a little bit. Now, and Brian, as far as the artificial footings go, we've been doing a little bit of experimenting on our own at a very slow pace, but with cutting footing on some different additives. There's several different factors involved, but not with conventional synthetics or things like that, just some different products to try and figure out how to stabilize that and keep them sounder. I find it pretty interesting what we've uncovered already, as far as I think there's some future and some different footing for the cutting especially. But one thing that we're starting to see is that for 20, 30 years now, the jumping footing has been synthetic. Well, one of the things that they're starting to, and I think we're a ways off from seeing the next evolution of that, is that, okay, when that's worn out, what do you do with it? You can't just take that out and spread it in your pasture, because it's not biodegradable. And so that's one of the things that we've been experimenting with on cutting footing, is some biodegradable products that the stuff doesn't have to be hauled off to a dump. When the cutting footing gets worn out, it's got a biodegradable additive in it that you can take out and spread in the pasture, no harm done.
But what I hear you saying is you're involved. I'm not trying to ask for proprietary stuff, but I hear you talking about being involved with advanced science, research, development of high performance, I'm going to call it cowboy
Mhm.
ground, because the reiners, the cutters, the cow horses, the demand, which is how do we, one, explore and gather more new information on how our ground is affecting our horses, which would enable our horses to stay sounder, longer, and perform higher. Am I somewhat true in that? And that's where you're going?
That's where we're trying to go. Obviously, to really advance that, you have to be funded. But one of the things that I'm seeing right now is that I'm going to be involved on a pretty high end of testing in association with the NCHA and Texas A&M. We're trying to develop a program to test the cutting footing and really advance that. One of the reasons for that is that, the price of these athletes has become astronomical. And even if you've got loss of use insurance on them,
Right.
that doesn't pay for the dream being crushed.
Right.
So that emotional attachment to them, I think, is going to drive part of this. But, the NCHA started to realize that at one cutting event, they didn't seem to have that many lameness issues. And at another event, at the end of the second day, they had 20 trainers sending 3 horses home that were sound when they got there.
Right.
And so they're like, okay, obviously we're starting to see a trend here. And I'm sure that to some degree, and I'm going to say that it's minimal, that maybe there's some training techniques involved here. But bottom line is, I think the majority of that fault probably lies in the footing.
Right.
And fortunately, you've got an association there that's well funded and willing to go down that path to see what they can do and move this forward. And that's pretty exciting stuff. It was about this time last year, I went to a vet symposium, and I was astonished. There was a lady from Switzerland that gave a speech on how they're starting to incorporate AI
Mm-hmm.
into lameness examinations.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just mind-boggling. Like, it was so intriguing.
Which puts it on the objective scale as opposed to the subjective scale.
Right.
And I could see that. I could see AI applications in research and knowledge in our industry, like at exponential levels, places that we can't even fathom at the moment. And so I find that conversation very interesting. And I think it's great. I didn't know that. That's kind of where you're headed. The more we've talked, the more I hear you talking about that. And the research component, I think, is a big one that our entire industry's been slack on.
And I've heard, I don't have very much information on it, that the AAEP is starting a pretty well-funded program of using AI and some different things like that. I don't know. I guess I'm like a lot of people. There's 2 things in life that are pretty concerning. One is social media, and the other one is AI.
It's because they're new.
Yeah, I think they both have the potential to be pretty dangerous. I think where we end up in 10 or 15 years, hopefully this all gets managed right, because it left unmanaged, it could do just as much damage as it could do positive. I mean, we've all seen what people are willing to do on social media anymore. That is, gosh, sometimes it makes you a little disappointed in human nature.
Well, yes, and I hear you. I could if you looked historically over time, wouldn't everybody have said something similar as forward advancement would always, you could have said that about the airplanes, could have said it about the combustion engine, could have said it about the ships, whatever that was, that humanity has moved forward. So I see social media because it's a communication tool, and I see communication as a positive thing, not a negative. Now it comes, where's the responsibility lie? It lies in twofold. One is the protruder of the information, and 2 is the receiver. But like all information, the receiver, you got to open your mind a little bit and pay attention to whether it's valid or not valid. And that's not new practice. It's just the transmission of information is way more faster. And that's where social media goes. I think the AI thing is a very fascinating stuff, especially as you explore objective truth of new information. And can it help us? Of course, it's only going to be as good as we humans put it to use. Is it going to exceed us? That's the one that I hear everybody talk about.
One of the positives of it is that, like I said, as I'm watching her presentation, that they're attaching modules to 50 or 60 different places on a horse to register that movement, and what they're able to detect is unbelievable. And then they take it even farther to where they've got shoes that have sensors in them that can tell you how hard that horse is hitting the ground on this surface. I think that there's some really exciting stuff coming up just around the corner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Interesting, right? The AI thing, of course, maybe it's our generation, but are you guys going to get in a self-driving car and let it take you to California?
No.
Sleep all the way there?
Not me. I get
I'm not
scared
either.
when I live in Phoenix and I drive around Phoenix and I see it coming the other way. I slow down and move over because I don't trust it. So that's just me.
There you have it. Are you going to let AI Jimmy tell you what kind of footing you're going to put in that pen and then have that self-driving tractor take care of it?
I'd like to think that I'd get to stay involved, but I see the potential here that could happen, that it just figures it out on its own. Now, we'll have to be in on this side of it to give AI the foundation, something to work off of. But yeah, there's obviously the potential that, that can happen. And as far as the self-driving drag, that's possible right now. That technology has existed for a long time.
Well, some little Chinese hacker that's got a horse in the rain inventory is going to sabotage that thing. Then it's going to make sure that, kind of like Stretch Bradley putting too much water on the pen, right? It's like this guy's going to say, now this morning that's where I'm going to be back.
Well,
but
the hacker's going to make it go through the gate.
Drill 72, we need to wait 3 hours for this ground to dry back out. We've been hacked.
Right? Yeah.
The answer is always in the middle, and I think some's good, but yeah, I mean, I'm not going that it's going to replace experience, right? I mean, I trust that veterinarian that's vetted 1,000 reiners as opposed to that AI telling me that, this is what's wrong with your horse. I mean, it's
not. I'll say this. As important as the footing is, there's other elements here that are equally important. And one thing that cannot be discounted here is the farriers.
Right.
That's an integral part of that interaction with the footing. You just can't underestimate that.
Between the vets and the farriers, their ability, look at what vets can do now with sonograms and CT scans, and it's readily available. They're mobile. They can be at the events. You don't have to go to a elaborate clinic like we used to, which gives them more valid info. The same would be true for farriers, because now when you talk about a 16th of an inch or a 32nd of an inch and you need to take it off the front left corner or whatever because the toes to whatever that is, that's valid, important info that will help our horses perform at the level that the demand is. So that's kind of where we're going.
Yeah.
And your ability to now use different shoe materials that you could be changing shoes readily without nailing them on the hoof like we always have.
I think there's some of that coming down the line because it ties into professional sports again. You see football players changing shoes all the time,
right,
to adjust to a surface.
Yeah.
And I think that on down the line, we're probably going to start to see the same thing. And it kind of goes back to what I said in the beginning. Going to have to start thinking outside of the box. We've nailed shoes on horses for hundreds of years, and I think we might eventually find that there's a better way.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, and I have had very good ground here at the Big Lake, and I probably, in the last 20 years, had front shoes on half dozen horses. I lived barefoot in front. My horses and never had a lameness issue from a foot. It's like actually their feet get tough and you're not worrying about pulling shoes and filling front feet full of nail holes. And, it just worked for me. Some people would have a panic attack about it and say, oh God, I got to have front shoes on everything. It's just different strokes, right? So,
but maybe it is possible to develop a footing that allows us to do that.
Right.
across the board.
Absolutely. Wow. Great point. Great point. Well, it's going to take somebody that, like yourself, that does nothing but think about it and live it to make it happen.
Well, thinking out of the box, and you just brought it up, but tell me quick on the industry and where, one, Jim, where do you see us going? And two, are there enough, I don't know what the right word is, but leaders, organizations, board of directors, responsible entities that are beginning to think forward, think out of the box, as opposed to, as an industry, our culture is to keep doing what we've been doing.
Yeah.
That's one of my frustrations, because we got to do it different and do it better. And it's just a forward push. So do you see us? Tell me what you see.
I think so much of that's going to be determined by the leadership of the associations and the industry. Are they willing to, like I said before, instead of increasing
The purse all the
the
time.
purse all of the time, investing some of that money into our athletes? I think there's one of the keys to the whole thing. Our leadership in the industry and our leadership in the country, there's some parallels there. You have people that are in leadership positions because of their egos, and other people that are in leadership positions because they're trying to do the right thing. And the more of those that we get in place that are trying to do the right thing, the easier that this is going to be.
Well, and I'll add one more. Egos, vested individual interests, and then you have trying to do the right thing for the better of the whole.
Right.
So, yeah.
But I think there's a key component to it. It lies in the leadership.
Right.
And I was so proud of the NCHA for stepping up and really being the first one in the Western discipline to address the issue.
Right.
I think that, excuse me. Go ahead, Brian.
No, specifically talking about footing and
Right.
pushing forward on research, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's fantastic. I don't know the NCH. I don't know, because I haven't been around the cutters or ridden any of them for 25 years. So haven't gone to the futurity and forever, and so just something I probably need to go back there and do again, just because it was a fun horse show.
So much of the push from the NCHA actually came from their foundation.
Well, and I think that's fantastic. But when you have, it comes from leadership. I don't have a great deal of faith in leadership from NRHA, because it's so self-serving and it's professional trainers that are doing the directing. So when you say, geez, we need to take some of this prize money away, I cannot see that happening, because even the board of directors, and Brian and I, we've both been there. He even more so than I as president of NRHA, but you can try and do the very best possible thing that you can think of for the industry, and you're going to have somebody that wants money that's going to drive the truck, I think.
So you went there. I was going to stay away from that, but you went there, and I agree with you. Self-serving is going to do nothing but get in our way, as it does for the industry. It's not just footing. They keep wanting to increase the prize money and prize money and prize money and all of these things, when in fact, if you go back through it and dissect it, there's probably some places that long-term they could make some better investments on to promote what this is going to look like in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Your trainers are going to need to follow suit. I've seen major training facilities that I want to try and form this. It's going to sound like an accusation, and that's not what my intent is here, but I've seen major training facilities that instead of improving their ground, they would buy therapy equipment.
Right. Put in a pool, do the saltwater baths, right? That's what you're talking about.
And so to some degree, the therapy equipment became a profit source instead of improving their ground. So there's issues across the board. It's not just one thing. The whole thing has to evolve. And that was what I alluded to before. You hope and do everything that you can for everything to move forward in sync instead of it just one aspect and leaving the rest of it in the dark ages.
But I would take us one more key step, because I think you're on a big topic. And here comes the demands to the organizations is too diverse. And is it time to take our organizations, all of them, from breed associations to discipline associations, and begin to have you can structure them in a lot of different forms. So it's not about the structure. It's about the focus to the goal. And the point is, advanced high-level performance is very different than research trying to answer key questions that the entire industry is undergoing and trying to figure out. So how do we begin to put resources, and forces together to answer key things that are different than trying to be so diverse to all? When we talk about, I don't care, cutters, cow horses, reiners, the diversity between the non-pro and hobbyist versus the professional that's trying to earn a living and doing this for all the economic reasons are completely different. And having the same rules and regs and the same standards for all of those groups is part of the pressure that we find ourselves in. And then that's why boards get developed the way they do.
It almost sounded like you were asking on how we manage egos.
Okay. Goes in there too.
Right.
But yeah.
No, go.
It's just about forward movement. And I see those pressures coming. I think the fact that the NCHA, Texas A&M's been around and been involved in a lot of research for a long time. Do I think that the horse industry, I could give you a list of major research projects that would be good for the horse industry as a whole. We all could. They're readily out there. What's not happening in the industry, and I would tell you we're not going to have time to talk about it, but the advancements and what we're seeing right now with the Horse Protection Act, federal regulation on horse shows, it's coming. And we'll do another show another time. But my point to that is what we're seeing, the need to answer key questions objectively. And that pressure across our disciplines and our sport is actually growing. And the resources needed to do it as an industry level, AEP, breeds, all the rest of that, the American Horse Council, state and federal governments, yes, our ability to do that in a better format as opposed to being reactionary, because that's what we're talking about. And I hear you loud and clear. Modern politics is another mirror to the rest of us in modernized society. Yes, it's 100% true. Just on the comma in the dollar moves over. That's it. But otherwise, it's the same stuff.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. Well, I have one more question. Jim, I've been around you many, many years, and you are a good outside the box thinker. What is Kiser development going to do in the future? You've given me great ideas about, what your development program is. What's on the list for you and family?
We're going to continue to keep building drags. I think that's going to be a little bit less of our focus, though. What I'm seeing and what our focus is going to become is in the facility staff training and starting to be engaged in as much of this footing testing as possible. I really think that it took a while to come to this realization, but if our focus was going to be on managing the footing at major events, then I think that was something that was going to keep us from being able to move into the next step. And that was not an easy decision to make that move away from managing the footing at major events. But I want to, at the end of the story, I want to say that we kept moving forward. And I think that this is the next step is on this testing and this facility staff training. One thing that we've discussed already is the shortage of qualified personnel to manage all of these shows. And it seems like we haven't been able to keep pace with that because the number of events continues to grow. I think to try and help catch that back up, we're going to have to rely on a lot of these facilities themselves to step up instead of relying on an outside source. And it's something that in the beginning, when I first started doing these facility staff training things, I wasn't sure if that was the direction. And I've actually gotten to the point now to like, I really, really enjoy that. And I like to think that 30 some years of experience and $350 million later that I've got something to offer. And the same goes with the testing of the material and trying to give us a better surface.
I think you're hitting on a big one. And one of the things that I've been motivated most of my lifetime was to get documented the historical knowledge gained through direct experience. And that's exactly what you're talking about. And I would bring it back to now social media and some of those things. Can we advance all of that for the betterment of all? I'm dead guilty. Jody's dad wrote a couple books. Why didn't I know that when I was 25 and 30 and 35 years old? I'm 60, and it was like
Jack had something to offer.
Yeah, no kidding. Now here's the cool stuff, though. It got written down and it's there. The bad news was the ability to disperse that and get that out to be more known as far as a resource was not. It's just a different time. That's what you're talking about, which is taking that set of information, sharing that with the industry in today's time. You do have a lot to offer, and yet you're going to gain even more. So I think that's phenomenal.
I think, there's a little bit of ego involved even on my part. I kid around about it. When this is all said and done, I don't think what I want to be remembered as is a really good tractor driver.
Right.
I think that there's so much left that we can leave something and say, we have really, really advanced this across the board. A little bit of exaggeration here, taking it out of the dark ages.
Yeah, Jimmy, I think that's fantastic, and I think that's a God-given plan for a great future for you and your son. That's gonna take over. I'll promise you, he will. I would think that he would anyway. I would hope so, but
time will tell on that. And at 15, he doesn't even know.
Right.
He has trouble matching his socks in the morning. But he does show a lot of interest in becoming an engineer. And so I think if he did decide to take this over, he's willing to get some education that could really help him move this forward too and keep it progressing.
Well, it's just I think that's just a great choice for the future. I would ask one last question. I know I said I only had one. I lied. If I had a barn full of 20 horses and I thought that Kiser's not taking over doing the dirt at the futurity anymore, I'd probably go into panic mode because I'd be worried about what the hell's going to happen. So what the hell's going to happen as far as major event footing that you have been doing?
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to throw that dart at you, but I'm like, what the hell, right?
I don't know what the answer to that is, Jody.
Okay.
There's some guys out there that have worked with us for a long time, and hopefully, time will tell. Hopefully they're able to carry this forward, but there still is a shortage of them. I'm hopeful that they can, but after having worked with them as long as I have, I feel like I've done as much for them as I can. And the one thing that we're going to have to understand, and hopefully it's very, very minimal, is that now when the pressure is on them, they'll have to start thinking on their own. And who knows? This is kind of one of those things that's tough to say. I hope they're better than I am. Some of them, I'll tell you this, we'll see what happens. Some of them have the potential. We'll see what happens when they hit that hard spot. And what I mean is how they deal with people and the criticism and everything that goes with it. And there were days I didn't do a very good job of that. I've explained that several different times. Both of you guys have seen this, and some people are able to manage it better than others. There are people that I've seen in these associations that, as far as the criticism goes, they have political ambitions. But about a year in, they start walking around like this in a defensive position because they're constantly under criticism. And I'm going to tell a funny story here that you'll remember this just like this conversation right now. I can remember sitting when you were the judge's monitor, you'd get your bunch ready and rolling in the morning. I'd get my bunch ready and rolling in the morning, and then we'd meet up in the corner and sit there and tell some jokes or whatever. And we're sitting there one morning by ourselves, and your world's round, my world's round. We've got this tapped off. And here comes a lifelong NRHA member. They've been to the fraternity probably every year since inception. And she walks up to us. We both know her well. Really nice lady. And she said, "Good morning, guys." "Hey, good morning. Good morning. Everything going?" "Yeah, everything's fine with me, but I just got a question. What in the hell does somebody have to do to market plus half around here?"
And you could probably go times 2,000 because that sentiment was readily available. Right?
But there's more in the position that I've been in. And again, I'll admit that I didn't manage it well every day. The hours at these deals and every other thing that goes with it, I think that's one of the places where time will tell if these guys are able to keep moving the ball forward. Because the amount of criticism and everything that goes with it, along with the hours and all the rest of it, it is not easy. And it's not just the ground. And as these things keep continuing to grow and the egos evolve and grow as well, really, really hard thing to do. And I wish them luck. I didn't spend the last 30 some years trying to make this advance just to walk away and hope that it fails.
Right.
That's certainly not the intention. But I think time better spent for me is to move forward into the testing and the training and things like that.
Explore what we don't know.
Maybe what to answer your question, Jody, maybe what we do see here is what you were talking about before, that somebody else develops a company that focuses on that. But one of the things that is going to require is these associations, facilities, and all of this budgeting for that.
Absolutely. Good. Yep. Very, 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 very good point.
It comes back to the money, and we're back to event production in all of its forms.
Right.
Managing the ground is only one of the key spokes in the wheel of putting on an advanced level horse sporting event. So yes, it's an important one, but it's one of those. And the industry is still yet to figure all of that out. We are not at the level that we're trying to go to. We're not. I think we all want to go there, but we're just at the beginning of that. It's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds. So
I think that, like I said a couple of times, one thing that they're going to have to realize is that to move this forward is not solely determined by the purse money. The rest of these things have to keep pace as well.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, I hate to do it because it's been so darn much fun. Jim, we've done one show with you. This is an even better one. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed it, and I miss the face-to-face with you, so we do need to get together. I mean, I saw you very briefly at the fraternity, but, we need to be able to sit down and spend a couple hours talking about how good we were.
Well, as we all know, those things are really important. They're sometimes hard to do. It does become more and more important. One of the reasons that I'm out here right now is because I lost a good friend. You look back and think, geez, there was an opportunity to spend a little bit more time with him, but we get wrapped up in life, and that's what it is. I can't tell you how much I have enjoyed this, the history that that the three of us have together. We've been great friends for, I'm not going to say the number.
As long as we're still here, we're still friends, so it's all good.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, man in the arena.
Jim is our man in the arena. And it's directly applicable to the Teddy quote because he was talking about being a good citizen in modernization back at the turn of the 20th century. So it's just applicable, parallel, directly to it. So, Jim, you are our man in the arena. I know there's a few other colleagues that you have across the industry. I think the exploration of what we don't know, I commend you all on that. The NCHA for putting some resources, one, acknowledging it, using the university system to do that research. I think that's one of the things that has pushed America forward in humanity. And so we ought to be, as a industry, taking advantage of that. So we wish you absolutely all the best. You know where Jody and I in the Cowboy Office are. So if we can ever be of any help, even if it's as simple as communication or doing more educational platforms. Maybe we need to have a Kiser educational webinar series so that people that, one, have interest, two, have capabilities, three, some time. Well, then guess what? You need to call Gwen McKenzie at Kiser Arenas. We'll put all the attachment, we'll put all that stuff in, because what I hear Jim talking about, they're going to go explore what we don't know and be able to come to you to share what they do know. I think that's huge.
Well, the other part of that, Brian, is that the more educated I am, the better that I'm going to be at the consulting work that I'm doing, which is a main focus of what I'm doing right now, and going to private facilities and helping them select their ground. So all of this education that I get will do nothing but strengthen that as well. And I'm doing 3 or 4 consultation jobs a month, and I'm looking forward to getting better at that. So, but really, really appreciate you guys' time. And your idea on the webinar thing's pretty intriguing. I think we need to have some more conversation about that.
We will have some conversation. I want to leave us with, share our best wishes to your mom and dad, Bob, and your mother as well. But I'm just sharing on the screen. That's Bob and Jim. That is Kiser Arenas. My grandfather had one of those, had a horse-drawn one. And I actually used it on the farm that I built. So when I saw this on one of your press releases, I thought that was way cool. We can't say thank you enough, Jim. Let's stay in touch. Let's not take for granted tomorrow. Let's continue to help everybody push forward. Until the next time, keep enjoying the ride. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, guys.
Jimmy, thank you, my friend. Stay in the middle.
Today's episode is brought to you by 4D Productions in cooperation with the Consultment Agency, a full-service agency that helps bring forward-thinking equine brands into the 21st century using digital skills and services such as website development, graphic design, social media, and media production such as the podcast you're consuming here today.